Well, hello and welcome. My name is Miss Heard with Miss Heard Song Lyrics Podcast. We're in Season 5, Episode 225, my first ever Beach Boys Miss Heard Song Lyric. The Miss Heard lyric is, I hear the sound of that church room. And then the correct lyrics is, I hear the sound of a gentle word. Well, I assume former English Prime Minister Sir Winston Churchill had many rooms dedicated to him, or he had a special room, but it sounds like they're saying Churchill room. But the correct lyric is gentle word. Well, anyway, this is about their song, Good Vibrations. If you haven't figured it out already, lots to talk about and a lot of stuff I learned about the Beach Boys. So let's begin. So Good Vibrations is a song by American rock band The Beach Boys, and it was composed by one of the Beach Boys, Brian Wilson, with lyrics by his cousin Mike Love. Who were they? Let's start with that. The Beach Boys were an American rock band formed in Hawthorne, California back in 1961 with the original lineup of brothers Brian, Dennis, and Carl Wilson, their cousin Mike Love, and then friend Al Jardine. They're well known for their distinct vocal harmonies, teen-themed, surf-themed lyrics, and they are one of the most influential acts of the rock era. They draw their music of older pop vocal groups from the 1950s rock and roll, black R&B, and from that they created their sound. And under Brian Wilson's direction, they often incorporated some classical or jazz elements and some, what we'll say, unconventional ways of recording techniques, which actually led to some innovation. So we'll go there. So how did they start? Like most bands, they were a garage band, and it's centered on Brian Wilson's songwriting and managed by none other than the Wilsons' father, Murray Gage Wilson. He was born on July 2nd, 1917, and passed away on June 4th, 1973. He was an American songwriter himself, talent manager, record producer, and music publisher, best known, of course, being the father of the Beach Boys, Brian, Dennis, and Carl Wilson. After the band's formation in 1961, Murray became their first manager, and in 1962, he founded their publishing company called Sea of Tunes with Brian. Later in his life, Wilson was accused of physically and verbally abusing his children, unfortunately, charges which he had denied till his death. So Murray Wilson was raised in Los Angeles. He grew up in a, what they say, hostile family environment due to his own father's violent nature. Unfortunate. And then after having his children were born, he actually found a machining business called ABLE. It would stand for Always Better at Lasting Equipment, so it was an acronym, but maintained an interest in music, which he passed along to his son. Murray Wilson also authored and co-authored at least 50 compositions in his lifetime with little commercial success, unfortunately. His most popular songs were Two-Step, Sidestep, recorded by a Johnny Lee Wills and Bonnie Lou in the 1950s, and Breakaway, released as a Beach Boys single in 1969. He was also credited for producing some of the band's early records, including the 1962 singles 409 and Surfin' Safari. The Beach Boys, unfortunately, dismissed him as their manager in early 1964 due to him being very overbearing and, they say, disruptive presence at the group's concerts and recording sessions. Yikes. Following this, he produced the sound-alike group called the Sunrays, didn't know that, and recorded an easy listening album, The Many Moods of Murray Wilson, from 1967. I got to check that out. Then Wilson controlled the Beach Boys publishing until 1969, when he sold Sea of Tunes to an Irving Almo Music in exchange for $700,000, which in 1969, that's equivalent to our $5.8 million in 2023. So a good amount. And then in 1973, he died, aged 55, so young, of a heart attack, with his management of the group's publishing becoming the subject of numerous lawsuits decades later. Because remember, he mentioned earlier, he was smart enough to, start that Sea of Tunes company that has all the publishing rights to the Beach Boys. So yikes. So let's go back to the band. In 1963, the Beach Boys enjoyed their first national hit with Surfin' USA, becoming a string of top 10 singles that reflected, like I said, a Southern California youth culture of surfing, cars, romance, dubbed the California Sound. They were, I didn't know this, one of the only few American rock bands to sustain their commercial standing during the British invasion, with the Beatles and other British bands coming in. So they still were popular. Starting with the 1965s, the Beach Boys today, they abandoned beach-going themes for more personal lyrics and what they call ambitious orchestrations. Then in 1966, the Pet Sounds album that has the song Good Vibrations single raised the group's prestige as rock innovators. Both are now considered among the greatest and most influential works in popular music today. I did not know that. Now, after scrapping the Smile album in 1967, Brian Wilson gradually ceded control of his group to his bandmates. In the late 1960s, the group's commercial momentum faltered in the U.S. They started to lose steam, and they were widely dismissed by the early rock music press before rebranding themselves in the early 1970s. That time, Carl Wilson took over as their de facto leader until the mid-1970s. When the band responded to the growing success of their live shows and greatest hits compilations, they started to transition to an oldies act. Then, sadly, brother Dennis Wilson died in 1983. He drowned and unfortunately was drunk when this happened, and Brian soon became estranged from the group. Following Carl's death from lung cancer in 1998, the band granted Mike Love, their cousin, legal rights to tour under the group's name, the Beach Boys. And I remember the Brian Love version of the Beach Boys because here locally I live in a town called Portland, Oregon, in the northwestern part of the United States. And they actually came to a venue here that was called the Civic Stadium. Now it's called Providence Park. Back in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s, where Mike Love's Beach Boy band came and performed at the Civic Auditorium or Civic Stadium with actor John Stamos playing the drums from then Full House fame. If you can imagine that, that was so surreal, but it happened, okay? And then Brian Love also leased exclusive rights to tour under the Beach Boys name in a boardroom settlement with Brothers Records. That was the Beach Boys company. However, there was some opposition from former bandmate Al Jardine, who's also been touring under the banners Beach Boys Family and Friends. Al Jardine, Beach Boy, and Al Jardine of the Beach Boys. During this time, and Love decided to sue him in order to prevent the use of the name. In the lawsuit, the courts ruled in Love's favor, denying Jardine the use of the Beach Boys name in any fashion. Jardine proceeded to appeal this decision in addition to seeking $4 million in damages. And guess what happened? The California Court of Appeal proceeded to rule that, quote unquote, Love acted wrongfully in freezing Jardine out of the touring under the Beach Boys name, allowing Jardine to continue with his lawsuit. The case ended up being settled outside of the court with the terms not disclosed. Interesting. So money was definitely exchanged there. Then in the early 2010s, the original members briefly reunited for the band's 50th anniversary tour. And as of this year, 2023, both Brian Wilson and Al Jardine do not perform with Mike Love edition of the Beach Boys, but remain official members of the band. So the one that's still doing it is Mike Love. So God bless him. So the Beach Boys are one of the most critically acclaimed and commercially successful bands of all time. They sold over 100 million records worldwide, and as it says here, helped legitimize popular music as a recognized art form and influenced the development of music genres and movements such as psychedelia, power pop, progressive rock, prog rock, I like to call it, punk, alternative, and lo-fi. And then between the 1960s and 2020s, the group had 37 songs reach the U.S. top 40. That is the most by any American band so far, with 4 topping the Billboard Hot 100. Then in 2004, they were ranked number 12 in Rolling Stone's list of the greatest artists of all time. And then many critic polls, they ranked today Pet Sounds, Smile, 1967, Sunflower, 1970, and Surf's Up, 1971, among the finest albums in history. And no surprise, the founding members of the Beach Boys were officially inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame back in 1988. So back to the song Good Vibrations, where the misheard song lyric was Churchill's Room. It was actually released as a single back on October 10, 1966, so it's essentially 57 years old, oh my gosh, and was an immediate critical and commercial hit, topping record charts in several countries, of course, including the United States and the UK. It was characterized by its complex soundscapes, episodic structure, and subversions of pop music formula. It was the most expensive single ever recorded, and Good Vibrations later became widely acclaimed as one of the finest and most important works of the rock era. Also produced by Wilson, the title derived from his fascination with cosmic variations or vibrations. As his mother would tell him as a child that dogs sometimes bark at people in response to their bad vibrations. I believe that. He used this concept to suggest extrasensory perception, while Love's lyrics were inspired by the nascent flower power movement. The song was written as if it was recorded in a similar fashion to other compositions from Wilson's Smile period. It was issued as a standalone single, backed with Let's Go Away for a While, and was to be included on the never finished album Smile. Instead, the track appeared on the September 1967 release of Smiley Smile. The making of Good Vibrations was unprecedented for any kind of recording because, building on the approach for Pet Sounds, Wilson recorded a surplus of short, interchangeable music fragments with his bandmates and a host of session musicians, one of them being the famous Wrecking Crew, at 4 different Hollywood studios from February to September of 1966. It was a process that reflected in the song's several dramatic shifts in key, texture, instrumentation, and mood. So when you hear it, it's like kind of like this is 3-4 different songs in one, right? It took over 90 hours of tape that was consumed in the sessions, with the total cost of production estimated to be in the tens of thousands of dollars back in the 60s. So let me give you some numbers here. One estimate of the overall production expense is between $50,000 and $75,000, which is equivalent to $450,000 to $680,000 in 2022. By comparison, the whole of Pet Sounds has cost $70,000, so roughly $630,000 itself, an unusually high cost for an album. In 2018, Wilson disputed the $50,000 figure for Good Vibrations, saying that the overall expenses were closer more to $25,000, which in 2023, that's equivalent to $237,000. Wow. Band publicist Derek Taylor dubbed the unusual work a pocket symphony. I love that expression, which helped develop the use of the studio as an instrument and heralded a wave of pop experimentation and the onset of psychedelic and progressive rock, prog rock. The track featured a novel mix of instruments, including a jaw harp, an electro theremin, and although the latter is not a true theremin, the song's success led to a renewed interest in sales of theremins and synthesizers. Like it's that ooh sound that you hear. How did it do? Well, Good Vibrations received a Grammy nomination for Best Vocal Group Performance in 1966, and it was inducted to the Grammy Hall of Fame in 1994. The song was voted number 6 on Rolling Stone's 2004 and 2010 editions of its 500 Greatest Songs of All Time list, re-ranked to number 53 in the 2021 iteration. It was also included in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame's list of the 500 songs that shaped rock and roll. And then in later years, the song has been cited as a forerunner to the Beatles' A Day in the Life from 1967 and Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody, which is also its own symphony in itself, in 1975. And then there was a famous cover done by Todd Rundgren back in 1976. It actually peaked at number 34 on the Billboard Hot 100. Other covers, so the interesting thing about the Todd Rundgren cover is it's nearly an identical cover version of the original. And it was added to his album called Faithful. When asked for his opinion, Brian Wilson said, quote unquote, "Oh, he did a marvelous job. He did a great job. I was very proud of his version." And in this example, like I shared here, it actually peaked at number 34 on the Billboard Hot 100. Rundgren explained, quote unquote, "I used to like the sound of the Beach Boys, but it wasn't until they began to compete with the Beatles that I felt that they were doing was really interesting, like around Pet Sounds and Good Vibrations. When they started to shed that whole surf music kind of burden and start to branch out into something that was a little more universal, I tried to do this song as literally as I could because in the intervening 10 years, radio has changed so much. Radio has become so formatted and so structured that the whole experience was already gone." And then in 2004, Brian Wilson himself re-recorded the song as a solo artist for his album Brian Wilson Presents Smile. It was sequenced as the album's closing track following In Blue, Hawaii. In this version, Good Vibrations was the project's only track that eschewed the modular recording method. The song's verses and choruses were recorded as part of a whole take and were not spliced together. Okay. And then in 2012, Wilson Phillips, a trio consisting of Wilson's daughter Carney and Wendy Wilson, and John Phillips' daughter from the Mamas and Papas, China Phillips, released an album containing covers by the Beach Boys and the Mamas and Papas titled Dedicated. Their version of Good Vibrations with Carney Wilson on lead vocals was released as a single from the album and peaked at number 25 on the Billboard's AC chart. That's pretty good, adult contemporary chart. So more about the song. Wilson's cousin and bandmate Mike Love submitted the final lyrics for Good Vibrations and contributed to its bass baritone vocals in the chorus. He recalled when he heard the unfinished backing track, he said, quote unquote, "It was already so avant-garde, especially with the theremin. I wondered how our fans are going to relate to it. How's this going to go over in the Midwest or Birmingham? It was such a departure from Surfin' USA or Help Me Rhonda. Love said that he wrote the words while on the drive to the studio, feeling that the song could be the Beach Boys' psychedelic anthem or flower power offering. He based the lyrics on the burgeoning psychedelic music and flower power movements occurring in San Francisco and some parts of Los Angeles area. And in writing in the book, in his 1975 book, The Beach Boys' Southern California Pastoral, Bruce Golden observed, the new pastoral landscape saw being uncovered by the young generation provided a quiet, peaceful, harmonious trip in inner space. The hassles and frustrations of the external world were cast aside and new versions put in their place. Good vibration succeeds in suggesting that the healthy emanations that should result from psychic tranquility and inner peace. The word vibrations had been employed by students of Eastern philosophy and acid heads for a variety of purposes, but Wilson uses it here to suggest a kind of extrasensory experience. The funny thing, though, is Capitol Records executives were worried that the lyrics contained psychedelic overtures, and Brian was accused of having based the song's production on his LSD experiences. I love how Brian Wilson clarifies, the song was written under the influence of marijuana, not LSD. He explained, quote unquote, I made good vibrations on drugs. I used drugs to make that. I learned how to function behind drugs, and it improved my brain. It made me more rooted in my sanity. Did you also know, according to Mike Love, the lyric that says, she goes with me to a blossom world was originally meant to be followed by the words we find, but then Brian elected to cut off the line to highlight the bass track linking into the chorus. Now, music video, they actually had one before music videos were even known. They made their own like mini music video or movie. It was uploaded on YouTube back on October 10, 2016. So 7 years ago? It already has 8.7 million views. And all it shows is the Beach Boys spending a day at the local fire department and having fun wearing fireman hats, sliding down fireman poles, jumping on a track. Also in the beginning, in the middle of the video, is a brunette in white shorts dribbling a basketball between her legs. And I'm like, who is that? Did some more searching. Some have speculated that the woman with the ball was Brian's first wife, Marilyn, a Marilyn Rovell. She was a 14-year-old, yes, 14, high school student when he met her in August of 1962 when Brian was 20 years old. I'm just going to let that simmer. And as you know, Marilyn is the mother of 2/3 of Wilson Phillips as the mother of Carney and Wendy Wilson. So lots that we unpacked here, and now we know of the kind of backstory between the cousins as well as the brothers and the friend Al Jardine and the usage of the Beach Boys moniker and everything in between. If you have great suggestions like this misheard song lyric about Winston Churchill, please send it to any of our sites like Facebook, Instagram, X, formerly Twitter, or just send me an email at misheard, that's MISSHEARD songs @gmail.com. Till then, keep singing those songs wrong. Bye!